Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and it's that time of the year again. Transfers, Gam and Tam, Lionel Messi, James Rodriguez, Son Heung-min, Brandt Bronico, the list goes on. It's 2026 MLS preview time. We're going through every team, reviewing last season, looking at transfers in and out, breaking down managers, tactics, key players, and doing some very specific predicting. But with Ryan Bailey becoming our new Dolly Parton, or at least I think that's why he's in Gatlinburg, I'll be previewing and hosting today. And I'm joined by the man who introduced me to the term cashfer. It's Joe Lowery. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Taylor, I am stoked for this. This is one of my favorite weeks of episodes that we do here at TSS. There's just something about a preview, right? Whether it's a World Cup preview, whether it's a season preview, hope abounds, logic escapes. This is just a good time of the year.
And Joe, would you like to explain what a cashfer is while we're here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My bad. Sorry. I should have done that when you tossed it to me the first time. Cashfer is the term that sort of those of us in MLS circles are using for a cash trade because MLS can't be normal and just call things a transfer. We have decided to not be normal also and call it a cash transfer, portmanteau to cashfer. So that's what that is. Ty Baribo cashferred from the Philadelphia Union to DC United. That's how I would use that in a sentence.
We really need Marcus Rashford to make a cashford.
Oh, we do.
That's what I'm about these days.
So desperately.
Well, I think of more rhymes. Joining us as well, a man who is the guardian of our MLS hearts and minds while also being the Guardian's MLS mind. It's Jeff Rueter. Hello, Jeff.
That would have been a great throw to Graham. Hi. Thank you. And listeners, if you ever want to question whether or not we are biased, if the four of us are going to be stumping for one team harder, go to the YouTube right now and notice all of us are wearing white, black, or gray. We have no fandom in this. We have no skin in this game. This is neutral as neutral gets.
We're pure. We're pure.
Just
here.
wait. I'm only not wearing a shirt because I didn't have the shirt of the
Well, you're
team
wearing
I
a
was
shirt,
previewing
listeners,
today.
just so you know.
Graham is not
wearing a
naked.
shirt.
Graham is not
This
naked.
it's actually the Chicago Fire shirt from a few years ago. Remember, they just had the white plain T-shirts.
Oh, yeah.
You
that was a good
You just
era.
can't see the
A good homage to late 2010s Adidas kit designs, yeah.
So Graham is wearing a shirt, and Joe referred to his white shirt as pure. An interesting start to the Total Soccer Show MLS previews.
I would love
rounding
that.
out the crew, a man who introduces us to new terms each week like Tatty Scones and Heart of Midlothian. It's Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham.
Midlothian. I feel like I've been talked about for the past 100 years. But yes, Tatty Scones was a new one on everyone last
to
week.
me.
Jeff, Tatty Scones, any idea what that is?
No, but you
Is that
said
any of the
scraggy while we were getting ready to record the show as well, so I think that we're,
Yeah.
I by the end of this week, I will learn so much, and I cannot wait.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be like, in a recipe you can sub one ingredient for another. I'm pretty sure you can sub a tatty scone for a scraggy. I'm pretty sure it's a 1-for-1. It's like applesauce in for eggs or whatever it is that you can do with that. It's the same thing.
Taddy Scones just signed for West Ham this winter, right?
Yeah, central midfielder. I'm keeping the Scraggies from our RSL preview later this week. You can't. You have to ration those Scraggies. They're precious.
I think it's applesauce and oil. That's my fault. Sorry.
There it is. Applesauce
My
and
bad.
eggs
Not
for
my finest. I'm gonna be better.
While I recover from that, Graham, can you tell our listeners about the latest updates to the TSS Patreon and the inclusion of the TSS Scouting Network? It returns.
Indeed. So we reintroduced the TSS Scouting Network last week. We're all very excited about it. This is an idea that I always thought was an excellent idea. This is TSS heritage. This is something that Taylor and Darryl used to do back in the day. And it's a very simple concept. So you can either request a player or we assign a random young wonder kid to you. And then that player, it's your job to scout them and then submit reports to us, and we will read them out on the show. We'll use them on the show, either on the Patreon or on the main feed itself. And it just gives people, I think, ownership of a certain player to carry through their career. And we still hear about people who someone was telling me about. They had Sergino Dest back in the day, and obviously he's flourished into a national team regular now and is playing for PSV Eindhoven. So I think it's a really neat idea. Joe and I have been busy over the weekend and late last week assigning players. I think we've assigned as many as 50 players now. If you want to be assigned a player in the Scouting Network, if you want to be part of this, all you need to do is become a top scorer, which is the top tier in the TSS Plus Patreon. Once you get into the Patreon, there is a post pinned to the top of the page. All you need to do is comment on that post and I will reach out to you and we'll assign you a player, and then you just submit the reports through the Google form in the Patreon as often as you can, and that would be great. I'm really excited to get this going this year.
So Graham and Joe have been doing a great job of assigning scoutees. Graham, have any reports already come in? Asks the person who's supposed to be compiling the reports.
I don't think so. Probably a little bit too early now, but we
Good.
we have assigned a whole bunch of players. Joe's been doing the legwork on that, so he's the one with the spreadsheets.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Jeff. No thanks to Ryan. Let's do some previewing, shall we? We've got our categories. We've got our teams. We've got our assignments. Joe Lowery, take it away if you would. We're starting in the East. We're starting with Atlanta United. Knuckles are being cracked. Bodies are being adjusted. We're all easing in. Here we go.
I'm standing today. Standing desk is in standing mode, so let's do this thing. Atlanta United, where we last left them. We left them with 28 points, 14th in the Eastern Conference, 29th in MLS in the Shield rankings, and with a whole lot of disappointment. It just did not work out one bit for Atlanta United in 2025. They started the year with big expectations. They loaded up with a then record signing of Emmanuel Latelat. More on him later. They also brought back in Miguel Almiron, a club favorite. There was a line of fans to meet him at the airport. Not sure how many of those same folks maybe would be out there after how last season went for him. Ronnie Dyla was hired to replicate an MLS Cup winning run with NYCFC. That didn't happen. They brought in Chris Henderson, and all of a sudden it was this list of names that were known or were very optimistic. A lot of people were optimistic about in MLS circles. And just none of it hit. The final third impact was poor from all the designated players. The team looked listless in just about every phase. It seemed like Ronnie Dyla lost the locker room. He was axed the day after the season ended. And now they go again, Atlanta United. But this time around, it's been a lot quieter for them in terms of off-season moves. They've had some notable outgoings, more so than incomings, I would say, except on the managerial front, perhaps. Ronnie Dyla is gone. Brad Guzan is gone. He retired in goal for Atlanta United, a club legend, to be sure. Brooks Lennon is gone at right back. Bartosz Slisz was sold over to Europe in central midfield. That's the outgoings. They brought in some bit parts here and there. Tata Martino, of course, is the biggest incoming addition. He comes back to this club after leading them to MLS Cup in 2018. He is certainly one of the most well-regarded managers in Major League Soccer. The player signings, though, have not been particularly notable. They brought in Lucas Hoyos, 36-year-old from Tata's old stomping ground of Newell's Old Boys. They brought in Thomas Jacob, who's presumably going to start. He's another former Newell's Old Boys player who came in from Necaxa in Liga MX. He's been playing as their starting number 6 all preseason long. He's a U22 initiative player. He's likely to provide some steel in midfield that Atlanta have just sort of lacked, really. They had a lot of midfielders, 6s and 8s, who were just sort of same, where there wasn't a whole lot differentiating one from the other, and I think Jacob is going to bring a bit more steel and mobility and vigor to that part of the field. They brought in some other young players, Adrian Gil from FC Barcelona. He was in their youth setup for a long time, had a bunch of injuries, never really cracked it for them, but he's a young American player who's back in MLS. But they haven't changed a whole lot. I think we were all sort of waiting this offseason to see, well, could Atlanta buy out one of these underperforming DPs? That hasn't happened. And Tata Martino and the rest of this club have been preaching patience, where Tata's even said, I know it's going to take longer than just this season to make this team back into what I know it can be. But that does sort of color my expectations for Atlanta, where I think I talked about them as being a team that could make a real jump this year when we had our trio last week, Jeff, Taylor, and I. But I don't think that jump is going to be to being a truly elite team in the Eastern Conference by any stretch of the imagination. Tata Martino, as I mentioned, is back, and he's going to set this team up, I would imagine, to be fairly proactive in terms of their tactics this year. They dominated the ball, Atlanta United, across his 2 seasons last time around. Under Martino, they had 55.6% possession across those 2 seasons. Now, they don't build from the back, or they didn't build from the back like San Diego or Chicago have done last season, or Columbus, right? But they did try to control the game, especially in the middle third and in the final third. I think we're going to see that again from Atlanta just because they do have a lot of attacking talent. Maybe they're going to try to be a little bit more transitional because I think that's where Latelat and Miguel Almiron are best. But they are going to, I imagine, control games with more efficiency than they did under Ronnie Dyla. The thing I'm maybe most curious about is how much this team's going to press. Because Tata Martino did like to press last time around. But I don't think you can press with a 30-plus-year-old Miguel Almiron and with Alexi Moranchuk in your team and maybe Steven Alzate as well. So I'm really, really fascinated to see what this team looks like defensively, even if it feels like we know how they're going to play some with the ball. Probably out of a back 4 for a big chunk of this year, but a back 5 is not out of the question. We've seen both of those things from Tata Martino before. In terms of key players for Atlanta United, I'm going to phrase this as questions instead of just absolutely listing names. I want to know how the DPs function together, because that is a huge problem. It was a season-defining problem for Atlanta last season. Emmanuel Latelat is a 9. He's got incredible speed, dominated the championship at times with his pace off the ball and his movement inside the box. That kind of 9, though, is not a Cucho Hernandez 9. He's not a 9 who finds the game and makes the game for himself and creates shots for himself. He needs service. The problem is Miguel Almiron is not a traditional number 10, even though he wears the number to find a number 9 who needs service. He's the guy who wants to run the channels, which is a little bit of a problem because he is declining athletically. And then Alexei Miranchuk is the prototypical MLS number 10. He floats around, likes to be on the ball, likes to drop deep, likes to play through balls. The problem is, it just seems like the speed of the game has passed him by, where even when he's on the ball, he's either making bad decisions because he's feeling rushed, or he's just not getting on the ball enough because he's not a very good player at this stage of his career. So how do the DPs function? Who's feeding Emmanuel Latte-Lat? All of those 3 players are incredibly important to Atlanta United this year. If they're functioning well, this team could be pretty good. But that's a massive, massive if. So those are key players. I'm curious if Thomas Jakob, can he provide some bite? So he's another key player to watch in midfield. And then at center back and goalkeeper, looking at position groups that are either new or have been incredibly injury prone for Atlanta United, or where they just lack stability. I think those are areas to watch for this team as well. Finally, my very specific prediction for Atlanta United. Someone not on this panel of 4 right now calls Steven Alzate, that central midfielder who I mentioned earlier, Darlington Nagbe-esque on social media. And here's what I mean by that. Alzate is incredibly unbothered whenever he's on the ball. So he's 27 years old, was signed from Hull City last summer. He was part of a pretty active summer window for Atlanta United to try to save their season, or more likely to try to build really for this new 2026 season. And he's just not in a rush. He has more than a twist, I think, of Darlington Nagbe-esque possessive control to his game, where he's calm on the ball, picks up good spots, roams his way out of pressure. He is just silky smooth in possession, can carry it forward, can connect play. What he's not, though, is fast. He does not really cover ground. He does not seem especially bothered to get back in transition. He's not really all that gritty. And so maybe Jakob is going to be the perfect partner for him. I think that probably will be the starting double pivot for Atlanta United for a big chunk of this season. But I like his game because I'm not invested in Atlanta United as a fan. So I find him enjoyable to watch. And I think he may frustrate some folks, but I also think he's going to draw a little bit of a Nagbe comp as the season goes on.
Joe, I feel like you've done a lot of heavy lifting to not overtly call this a slow team, but you certainly haven't called them a fast team, and you certainly haven't called a lot of their players speedy.
Yeah.
Does that all inform the idea that they will be, or try to be, a little bit more possession-oriented, since they can't maybe press as effectively, efficiently, quickly?
I think there definitely is some of that, Taylor. It's weird, though, with Atlanta, because some of their players are just completely immobile, and Miranchuk is the worst example of that. And others of them truly are at their best on the break. Almiron is at his best on the break. Latte-Lat is certainly at his best on the break. That's a challenge for Atlanta, where it seems like they don't have a super clear idea of how they've built this squad. And so it makes it difficult to figure out exactly how Tata Martino is going to get the most out of this team. So my honest answer for you, Taylor, is I don't really know what this team is going to look like. I'm pretty sure they're not going to be great. I'm pretty sure they're not going to be very good. I think they could flirt with a playoff spot if Tata Martino can find the right recipe. But I'm not holding my breath on any of that stuff for 2026.
I have some Latte-Lat takes from last year that aged terrifically from around this time.
Yeah.
I mean, he started off quite fast, right? First couple game weeks,
He's
I think
always
he scored.
fast, yeah.
Yeah, but
It's like his whole thing. But I think he was kind of grasping at chances. He had some really promising interplay with Almiron from jump that made it look really promising. And then the sequences where it's like they were just a foot off in terms of where the ball was delivered or getting the timing right on the volley. We assumed that would iron out over time, and we were proven wrong. And that was very concerning.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's priority one, to be honest, for Atlanta is, can they feed Latte-Lat? Because the dude scored 7 goals last year. He was brought in for $22 million. That's untenable. It's a brutal situation. I believe that Latte-Lat wasn't fully healthy for some of last season. There could be some other stuff going on there. I don't know. But I think he's an incredibly talented player, and the guy just needs service. So that's a huge question mark if he's going to get it this year.
Final quick question, Joe. With Tata Martino, how adaptable is he as a manager? Or is he married to one particular style? Or if his team isn't built to press, will he not look to press?
The second thing, I believe. I think Tata Martino has ways that he wants to play. He wants to be somewhat modern and control games with the ball. He would like to press off the ball. But, I mean, the dude is too smart to look at Alexei Miranchuk and think, yeah, this guy's going to give me elite pressing output. He is going to be malleable. With Atlanta, there was a time where he switched and became a bit more transitional towards the end of the season there. So I think that's all in his bag. With Miami, think about that when Messi came in and all those folks came in 2023. They did become Miami a bit more reserved defensively because there's just no way to not when you have the personnel that they do. Atlanta won't be Miami from that second half of 2023 in terms of how passive they are defensively, but I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to jump you all that often either.
All right. Well, this weekend I learned that Joe is a certified hater of a couple teams. More on that later. But I'm going to add Alexei Moranchuk to that list. Credit to you, Joe. Credit to Alexei Moranchuk, and credit to Jeff for taking the time and putting forth the energy to tell us all about CF Montreal, where we shall head next.
Somehow the longest dossier I pulled together for this
No way.
is CF Montreal.
Jeff, that's
because
troubling.
it is an attempt to learn a team that we haven't had to pay much attention to since 2016. CF Montreal, subtitle, the way things are going, they may need another rebrand to CF Montreal. When we last left them, they were in their comfortable habitat towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference. They were nested third bottom in both that and the Shield race. Thank you to the Uniteds of Atlanta and DC. They had 6 wins, 34 goals, negative 26 goal difference. That's not going to get you in the playoffs, no matter how far they expand that thing. They didn't win a game until their 12th, which scuppered the Laurent Courtois era before it ever began. Marco Donadel took over as the interim, and he's still there. They took interim off of his job title. They lost in the quarterfinal of the Canadian Championship to Forge FC, and they have made just one appearance beyond the wild card or play-in round since 2016, and that happened in 2022. So what has changed? Well, they have had some comings and goings here. Bryce Duke is gone, memorably part of one of the most lopsided trades that we have seen in recent memory in Major League Soccer. Fernando Alvarez, a Colombia youth international, has left and trying to kind of launch his career in a different part of the world. Dante Sealy was traded to Colorado for $1.9 million of general allocation money. Jonathan Sarra, their kind of starting goalkeeper who was phased out towards the end of last season, was traded to Dallas for $350,000. And Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, who they had been trying to actualize the considerable potential of that Toronto couldn't, was flipped for Wiki Carmona of Red Bull New York. Get used to saying that. I'll try. And in we have that guy sort of guys. We've got Wiki Carmona, who was with the New York Red Bulls. We've got Brian Vera and Tomas Aviles, who were center backs who were phased out of Real Salt Lake.
Tomas Aviles, that makes things more interesting.
See, this is the thing of Montreal, where you'll look at the squad and be like, oh, well, that's interesting. Like, I can see what you're seeing and what you're trying to build here, but then you look at other ones like Daniel Rios, and that'll be a backup striker, and that's fine, that's credible, but not necessarily raising the floor or really pushing your ceiling. You have Noah Streit, who was signed last week. He is a Swiss youth international, came up through FC Basel, best academy in the country. Didn't play a single senior appearance for Basel, so that is always something that's kind of interesting when you are willing to give an academy product minutes that the own team couldn't kind of find as part of the rotation and the plan. But Donadel sounds like he wants to use him as an inverted left winger, coming in, cutting onto his right foot, and so I think that could add some dynamism that this team does need. Dagger Dan is here, Dagordan Throhalsen.
Yes.
This is also a squad that tests your pronunciation skills. Was acquired for $500,000 of allocation money from Orlando. He will provide width on the right side. And there you go. That's no Didier Drogba, is it? Donadel, who played with Drogba, was made permanent after netting 0.97 points per game in 35 games as interim manager last year, which sums things up quite nicely about the state of CF Montreal. The fans like him due to his time as being that enforcer in midfield. He played kind of a 4-2-3-1, not terribly cross-heavy, kind of middle of the pack when you look at a lot of underlying numbers. Just a team that was playing soccer. There wasn't really a terribly distinct style, but it sounds like in preseason this year, physicality was a crucial part of it. There were actually some opponents, including the Philadelphia Union, who had some quiet gripes after the game about the physicality of CF Montreal and maybe going a little too hard for what they understood the spirit of friendlies to be. So beyond that, Prince Owusu is saying that they're pretty similar tactics and is very excited about that. Donadel, quote, last year we got 28 points. This year we want to get 20 more. That would be 10th in the Eastern Conference last year, which would be a considerable jump for them, but also 5 points out of 9th. Key players beyond the new guys that we've talked about. Prince Owusu is the guy who would start on a lot of other MLS teams. He was finally able to break through and hit double-digit goals for the first time in his career at age 28. He had 13, 17 in all competitions, 5 assists as well. Like a true line-leading fulcrum of a striker that wingers and attacking midfielders would love to play off of. Helps with possession schemes if you want to, but also is able to be incisive and run into space, collect, and score. He's going to score left-footed primarily, get some headers as well. Ivan Jaime was brought in last year. He is still on loan through the summer. So June 30, you'll see him for the first 13-ish games before the World Cup break, and then we'll find out if he's back or not. He will also be cutting in from the left. I would imagine Noah Strite's going to be kind of phased in with Jaime being the primary starter. Jalen Neal is another guy who was acquired last winter from the LA Galaxy as part of them trying to get cap compliant. Injuries left him very little time to adjust to life beyond his boyhood club. He's a World Cup long shot at this point, but hey, center back for the U.S. men's national team, you never know how many they're going to need to bring. He was very emergent, though, at the Gold Cup in 2023, and will have competition with Vera and Aviles to keep him on his toes. Hennady Sinchuk was brought in last year as well. He's a Ukrainian U22. Dribbly boy, his first goal was a very pretty dribbly boy goal where he was able to beat a guy one-on-one and then curl a ball to the far post with his left foot from about 20 yards out, which is just fun to watch. So you want more guys like that. He'll probably play as a number 10, and they brought in another Ukrainian on loan this year to kind of help him with acclimating to life in Montreal. Odds and ends, Sam Piet's there. He'll probably be on Canada's World Cup roster. You would imagine he's kind of a vital midfield enforcer type, and if that is the tactical ideology that Donadel wants, Sam Piet's going to be at the heart of it. Very specific prediction. They will exceed last year's total of penalties conceded before the World Cup break.
Oh, yes.
And I say that because last year they were the only team in Major League Soccer to not concede a penalty. This is a tap-in, boys. It's my first VSP in the history of this show, and I don't want to mess it.
Oh, Jeff, that is exceptional. I didn't realize the number was sitting at 0 from last year. By bringing Tomas Aviles in on loan, I think they've already guaranteed.
I was tempted to
that.
say by the end of February, yeah.
That is, Jeff, that is absolute gold. And excellent work all the way across the board, I must say. I mean, Montreal, they're a joke of a team. Like, let's be totally honest, right? And I don't think I'm gonna say anything that fans don't feel themselves. So I feel motivated to say this. 29 MLS teams are trying to win trophies, and then there's Montreal. Like, they're playing in their own little sandbox. Owner Joey Saputo's sons are in charge of the roster build. The club doesn't sign serious designated players. Their one DP, Ivan Hamey, that Jeff mentioned, is on loan through June. So I mean, it's a joke. Like, there's no depth in this squad, no real depth in this squad. They have an owner who doesn't care and a roster that shows it. That's the reality. They're going to be bad this year. They're always bad. This team is completely listless, and there's no hope for this season.
They have given Inter Miami a lot of flexibility, though, so that's good of them. You take an Aviles, you do the Bryce Duke thing, and give them a bunch of gam. Well, I mean, that's nice, making Miami better.
They're gracious, man. They're gracious. Who can say they're not?
If you keep giving them your lunch money, eventually they'll be your friend, right? Right?
Right?
Joe, what is the thing they could do, but won't do? But what would be like the number one thing that would make you think they are a more serious club? Is it basically new ownership? Is that how far up we have to go here?
Yeah, I'd rather Jeff get this than me. Jeff, what do you think?
I think appointing someone as sporting director who isn't the owner's son would be a really good step. Okay. And getting
Graham
someone
Ruthven,
who has
answer the
kind
call.
of a credible
Cousin.
Cousin works, yeah.
Yeah, Cousin Saputo. Yeah, this is different from before. Yeah, it's different. I mean, it's what Jeff said. It probably is an ownership change because, look, it's not my money, I suppose, but Saputo is clearly trying to minimize losses and maximize long-term enterprise value of this team, which is, I suppose, within his rights to do. It's also within my rights to call it a joke when it comes to actually competing as a team, and that's what this team is.
Maximum enterprise value might be head and shoulders above the rest in terms of corporate speak used on this show before. So nicely done, Tata Martinjo. Nicely done, Jeff Rueter, for your first preview, or your first specific prediction, I should say. Well done, my friend. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk many more East Coast teams very soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. We continue to preview the 2026 MLS season, looking at the the Eastern Conference today. Doing great is your host, Taylor Rockwell. Hopefully I do a little bit better with my first team to preview of the season, Charlotte FC. The team that I alluded to earlier, Joe Lowery is apparently a certified hater of. Joe, how does it feel to have that officially recorded as what? Charlotte and Austin? Are those the two, or is it Houston?
So I didn't actually read the full Paul Harvey article that you're referencing from American Soccer Analysis. I just saw that I was the second best MLS predictor, with fewer seasons predicted, I might add, than Matt Doyle. So I didn't do the average, but I'm just saying there's some potential there. That I came in second.
Her 90s are strong. They're jumping off the page, Joe. I
think so too. I'm happy to come in second. I probably have underestimated Charlotte and probably Austin, I guess. Houston have... maybe both of those teams. Charlotte, though, have put themselves in a position where they are reasonably very good. Every team in the Eastern
Get outta
Conference.
here.
And so I've probably undersold them. Yes, Taylor, would you like to say something?
I get to say the nice things about Charlotte. You're the one who doesn't like them.
My bad.
Here we go. I'm going to talk about Charlotte and last season. Club's best finish in terms of both points with 59 and place in the table. They were fourth in the East. Dean Smith as the manager, Zoran Kraneta as your general manager, have built a strong team that does seem to get underrated. I think that was the point of the American Soccer analysis piece, was that they're a team that I think people tend to overlook or not give enough credit to, despite being a team that is difficult to beat, difficult to break down, and does have some talent therein, and seems to be a team that is very good at finding talent and maybe playing above the station that you would expect, hence the underrated part of things. They've sold key players. They sold two of them last season, Patrick Adjumang in the middle of the season, and then Adilson Malanda was sold in the middle of the season, loaned back, completed the term, now he is gone. $13.8 million combined for those two. But they managed to also find creative ways to deal with absences. They bring in Wilfried Zaha on loan because nobody else could because of FIFA rules. They bring in Pep Biel, both of whom are still here and I believe still on loan. So you can basically make that. Excuse me, is Biel now permanent?
Biel's on a permanent deal at this point. Yeah.
But the idea that you can kind of bring them in, see what they're going to bring you, and then decide what you want to do with them is a really smart move when it comes to Major League Soccer, because you can then kind of have that bigger. What's the word I'm looking for? Sample size. There it is. To make sure you've got what you want. They claimed Almiron's discovery rights last season, then flipped them for money. That's a pretty smart move. And then they made some more good decisions.
He used to play for. Oh, that's MLS right there.
That's genius. They discovered him. What more do you need, Graham? They've made, I would say, like smart moves, albeit reasonable moves in the offseason, like bringing in Henry Kessler. With Malanda gone, they needed center back depth / a potential starting center back. Henry Kessler will likely be that because Andrew Privet is the other option, and he is primarily left-footed, as is Tim Ream, who obviously is a starter. So maybe you can go to back three, maybe you go to back four, but either way, they've got a little bit more depth than they would have had otherwise. They bring in Luca de la Torre from Celta Vigo, but kind of from San Diego, sort of. It's a little confusing. But he fills out their midfield. He gives Dean Smith more creativity and a bit more effort centrally, and I think will be an automatic starter. And then David Schnegg, who is one that I was ready to kind of roll my eyes at. This is the underrated part of things, because he comes from DC United. He was a bright spot for DC United, but is sort of isn't that not that big of a deal to bring in a bright spot for a very, very bad team? But I think he gives them depth, the potential to start. He's 27 years old. He's coming in from Austria / DC United. But I learned was second best in possessions won in the final third in the league last season, amongst fullbacks, that is. So a very specific category, but one that shows you he can get very involved, very advanced, and help with pressing, help with ball recovery further up the pitch. And maybe he isn't going to start right away, because I think Harry Toffolo, who started last year, is still likely to be the starter. But I think Schnegg could become a starter somewhat quickly, because he does give you that variety to the way they can play. Other key players, I mentioned him already, but Tim Ream is a veteran and a leader. And I think aside from all the things he does that we know he can do on the pitch, including be incredibly fast, Joe always talks about
just
how fast
rapid.
Tim Ream is. I think he's just he's a very smart player to have from a leadership perspective, because he just does little things that maybe I'm inclined to overrate. But one of his talking points in preseason has been how everybody has showed up really fit and really ready to go, even with the weather in Charlotte, even with ice on the ground, even with limited training. Everyone just seems fully fit, and he hasn't said this quiet part out loud, but ready to move on from what happened last year in the playoffs, because that is the other part of the story for Charlotte, I think, is that they have a strong season, they finish well, they've got some pieces that are performing well, they find other pieces that they didn't know would be as valuable as they were, but they lose a certain man by the name of Pep Biel right before the playoffs, and then they lose in the playoffs in the first round and don't look very convincing without him in there. So it seems like it was a team that thought they were going to go further, thought they were going to be able to do more, and then had a really disappointing end to the campaign. And so Tim Ream kind of just talking about the positivity and the fitness and how everybody's locked in and ready to go. I think that's what you want your veteran leaders to be out front saying. and kind of building the momentum in that way. Other key performers, Christian Kalina, had a bit of a downturn at times last season, their goalkeeper, before regaining his standard level. Second best save per 90 percentage in the league. 48 goals conceded, 56.82 XGOT against. So basically saved them 8 goals, which is the second best number in Major League Soccer last season. So a strong performer, even when he does have slight downturns, he is still going to average out into a very reliable shot stopper and a very good player for the Charlotte team. And speaking of very good players, let's talk Pep Biel for a moment. 20 goal contributions in 26 games before suffering the hamstring knee injury that caused him to miss the final 8 games and the playoffs. Some question as to where he will play this season. I'm interested to hear what Jeff and Joe might say about this one, and Graham, if Graham has thoughts on Pep Biel's positioning. But I kind of have it as like 4-2-3-1.
Legitimately one of my favourite players in MLS last year. I think I wrote about him for The Guardian, Pep Biel. But yeah, sure, Jeff and Joe, you give your thoughts on the team that I predicted to make the Eastern Conference Final. I went the other way than Joe. I was leveling us out.
Certified hater. Graham Ruthven.
All right. So good.
He could play on the right in a 4-3-3/4-2-3-1/ formations are meaningless. But I think also could be their number 10, has looked better as their number 10. Some concern that others are probably more equipped to talk about in terms of his relationship with Wilf Zaha, or lack thereof, and how they don't always look fully fluid, fully connected when playing together. But still, he seems the one who is most capable of pulling strings, building attacks, being calm on the ball, all those things you want from number 10. So my guess is it is Ashley Westwood, Luca De La Torre, and Pep Biel in the middle, with Wilfried Zaha on the left, Kerwin Vargas on the right, and Idan Toklamati up top. He would be your Ajamang replacement last season. Comes in and has a very strong campaign, 15 goal contributions in 33 matches, including 12 goals. And that leads to my very specific prediction. I say Toklamati will score at least 15 goals, and to add a compounder to it, Archie Goodwin will score at least 75% of his goals from inside the 6-yard box. Ooh. Joe, I know you are excited about Archie Goodwin from your backfield preview. I am excited because every single goal I've seen him score is him making a smart run, arriving in the exact right spot, but doing so from like 1 foot from the goal line. So I think he is a like fox in the box, a hard worker, don't get me wrong, but I think he is going to be a depth option for them. He will probably start in spells for Toklamati, and I think is really capable of getting on the end of passes, getting on the end of crosses, getting on the end of chaos, essentially, and making something happen. So I think he'll score a few goals, and I think the majority of them will be inside the 6-yard box. And then I think Toklamati will kind of pick up right where he left off and be a very good goal scorer, but now with more starts and more minutes. He had 19 starts in 1,800 minutes last season. That gave him 1,800 minutes, excuse me. So I would assume that with more starts as the like genuine number 9 up top, he's going to get more goals as well. So it's a 2-part prediction, and I'm excited for both of them because I, unlike Graham, do have strong feelings and strong positivity towards Charlotte.
I want to ask, I actually do want to get Graham and Jeff's thoughts on where Pep Biel should play. I love that prediction, Taylor. Less because I'm like an Archie Green stan. Oh, sorry, Archie Goodwin stan. I don't know where Archie Green came from. That sounds like an NBA player from 1992 for some reason.
He really does. Or a Happy Days character.
Yeah, that too. I'm less of an Archie Goodwin like guy and more of a Charlotte FC just seem to know how to find their nines kind of guy. Where they end up with Patrick Agyemang. He does great. They move him on. They bring in Idan Toklamati ahead of that exit for Agyemang. He jumps into the starting lineup immediately and is now a guy who looks like he's probably destined to be the next one in line after Agyemang and Malanda to go and make them, I don't know, $8 million in a move to the championship or something along those lines. Goodwin's the next one. You know, I asked Oren Cornetta when I sat down with him a couple weekends ago, where do you, how do you find these guys? Like, what are you looking for that helps you identify strikers so well? And he basically wouldn't put any of his cards on the table, you know, which I respect. But they know they have a way to go out and find these players, and they've had a lot of success doing that. So I do have some Archie Goodwin stock just by the merit of Charlotte FC as a club. Who you're right. I mean, I probably have underrated. I think this team's ceiling is below the best in the East and the best in the West as well. But their floor is really high. Like they've done a really good job of not breaking the budget on signing DPs because it doesn't seem like that's who they want to be as a club, but identifying really good, effective MLS players. And Biel is the best of the bunch. Graham, you go. Where do you think he should play?
I mean, anywhere he has the freedom to. I think there was a point last year where he was averaging more through balls than any other player in the league, and in the league of number 10s, right? That's
in the league of
really
Messi,
impressive, and in the league of Messi as well, yeah. And I remember, I'm trying to think back to what. I did write about him last season. I'm trying to think what it would have been about and when it was. I think Ben Wright maybe wrote something on how Pep Biel was. There was like a designed play that was designed. Do you remember this, Joe?
Yeah, he would drop in sort of from that right half space almost, right, and get on the ball with his left foot and then just play these absurd through balls in behind. 100%.
So I mean that seemed to be where he was doing his best work, and I think. One of the most impressive things about the way Pep Biel flourished last year was it said something about the evolution of Charlotte, where obviously they had that defensive basis. They've always had that defensive basis under Dean Smith. And then the question was like, right, can you turn the dial up to be slightly more creative? Pep Biel brings that to them until he gets injured. Now the question is, well, do you have other ways to score goals? And also, do you have that sort of like possession hub in a slightly deeper position in the field? That's why I like the De La Torre signing so much for Charlotte. Like De La Torre at times hasn't always been my favourite player when you look at his role in like a certain team or even for the national team. I was pretty scathing of him in the summer at the Gold Cup. But for this Charlotte team, I think he ticks a lot of boxes for them. So I feel like Charlotte have really good coverage across the field where even if they can get a little bit more at Zaha on the wing this season, that probably does move the needle a little bit for them. And Toklomati's obviously done a great job of kind of replacing Adjaman, which I didn't totally expect. So I am quite positive on Charlotte's chances this year, as I was last year when I predicted they'd make the Eastern Conference final. I was made to look stupid by that 3-game series against New York City FC, which I do not want to watch again. It was 3 of the worst games of the whole season.
No one should ever make you have to watch those again, Graham. It's
Thanks,
okay.
Jeff.
It's okay now. It's in the review.
Nope.
The only
now you
my
have to.
big concern.
Now you have to watch it all.
Now you have to watch it all before your next segment starts. I think the hard part with Charlotte is that their core is so veteran that at a certain point they get old. And right now, when you look at their midfield, I love the Luca De La Torre pickup. I think that's going to do really well for the ball progression. It's going to help Pep Biel find like open space to be able to like actually have more time to operate, which I think is excellent. Ashley Westwood is still going to be starting at the base of midfield and is still going to be responsible for doing pretty much all of the defensive screening of the back line at this point as constructed, assuming it's the midfield we all think it's going to be. And they don't really have adequate cover. Brant Bronico is also over 30 at this stage. So I would wonder if it doesn't work out to keep Wilfried Zaha at the end of his loan, or if he moves off of a designated player slot, is that where you want to use that third DP slot, if that's how they choose to build this thing? Because keep in mind, when they came into the league, they did kind of say they wanted to crib off of Atlanta United's DNA, and they had the NFL owner, and they wanted to spend accordingly, and they just have not done that. They've made some attempts, right, including trying to get Atlanta United's own Mikel Almiron, but it just still hasn't quite been what we thought they would be when they came into the league. And maybe that's okay, but it is something where at this stage, it is pretty clear that's not part of their identity.
They do also still have Leo Labata, who I should mention since he is a designated player. He's looked better in preseason. Hopefully that continues for Charlotte. And I think overall, I am pretty positive about the Charlotte team. I think there are concerns about depth, especially attacking depth. But that aside, they seem like a team. I think this is maybe a sky is blue sort of statement. Not a blue sky, but a like, oh, look at that blue sky. Oh, water is wet sort of thing. They feel like a team that if they were enjoying what they were doing last season under Dean Smith, they will have a good to better season than they did the season before. Because there is just so much consistency to this starting 11, and the areas where there are new faces, it feels like it's areas of need and areas where they needed either more depth or a different starter right away. So I think if it was working, if everybody was enjoying Dean Smith, I think it will continue to work and look pretty effective. If it's like they're doing the same thing in training every single day and everyone's kind of tired of it, it also does have that possibility of the wheels falling off, but I haven't gotten any indicator of that. No. Thus far, it seems like all the messaging is everybody's fit, everybody's ready to go, everybody loves each other. It's all going to be just fine, even if Graham and Joe don't like us. So Correct. I'm glad that we've finally gotten that out of the way, and Graham has been painted with a fair brush.
They've given us a training ground for the summer. Charlotte are golden in.
Oh yeah, there it is. That's why you like Charlotte. I get it. Yes. That seemed to physically pain you that Scotland would be training in the same city that Ryan Bailey exists in.
Yeah, after the Harvey Barnes news last week, that was yet more bad news for Scotland that we're going to be based in Charlotte. No, I've heard Charlotte's very nice. Steve Clark said they wanted a quieter city. So I don't know whether Ryan would push back on that or not. But
yeah, I was going to say quieter than what?
Then, I don't know, running street fights in Glasgow, I suppose. If that's the bar, then that is quieter,
That is
I guess.
the bar. Graham, while we establish that bar for Charlotte and Scotland, let's establish what your thoughts are on the Chicago Fire. Your first preview of the season. Away you go.
Indeed, the best MLS franchise, named after an NBC TV series that handily dominates the Google results when you search for them. The Chicago Fire, the greatest club in the world, named after a city-defining tragedy as well. But they weren't the greatest. I've always found that a bit funny about the Chicago Fire.
I was going to introduce you with it, and then I was like, that's unfair to put Graham in that level of a corner with immediately trashing it. And then Graham just did it himself.
Yeah, there we go. It's going to get better from this point on, I swear, Fire fans. But they weren't the greatest in the Eastern Conference last season. They finished 8th and went out in the first round of the playoffs. However, the subtext to that is that was still a giant step forward for the Chicago Fire team, considering where they had been for so many years. Where they had been, see everything we were saying about CF Montreal, that's what we were saying about Chicago Fire for such a long time. And they aren't that now. It feels like they are a serious franchise finally. And perhaps an even bigger step forward than the results that they achieved last year was the way that they achieved those results. So Greg Berhalter came in as the new head coach and director of football, and they almost immediately became a much more proactive front foot team. I vividly remember the opening game of last season against Columbus, which Chicago ended up losing 4-2. But the way they played that game was like a real mission statement for the rest of the season. And while they weren't quite as good as I thought they might be coming out of that game, Chicago still played some really good stuff. And that was certainly true in the forward line. In fact, down at Miami, were the only team to score more goals than Chicago last season. So we see a great deal of progression in those numbers. And the good news is that the 3 players most crucial to that forward line, they're all returning for 2026. So that's Hugo Kuipers, Philip Zinkernagel and Jonathan Bamba, who combined for 37 goals and 28 assists last season. I think it's fair to say they're one of the most formidable forward lines in MLS, certainly in the case of Kuipers and Zinkernagel. I think Jonathan Bamba can clearly produce when required, but is maybe a little bit inconsistent, and that's maybe where he can take a step forward this year. The Fire, however, they have lost Brian Gutierrez, which I'm sad about. He was always a player that I enjoyed watching. He joined Chivas at the end of last year, which is a shame because I really thought we saw Guti take a step forward in 2025. He really is, in 2026, having a whole new me, new life sort of reinvention in Mexico, because he's no longer a USA player either, filing that one-time switch to play for El Tri as well. So I wish him luck, but I am sad that I personally don't watch a lot of Liga MX, and I enjoyed watching him last year. Bringing in Robin Lod over the off-season, I think, is a good move to replace Gutierrez. Might actually help them become a slightly more mature team as well. Chicago have also brought in Swedish midfielder Anton Salatros, who is not someone I'm overly familiar with, but 29-year-old central midfielder, left-footed, has a decent goal-scoring record back in Sweden as well. Kellen Acosta has left. He wasn't playing much, so that won't be felt a huge amount on the field, but he was on a largish contract, so that's something that they needed to do. And the defensive line has been a big focus for Chicago over the offseason. That's where they primarily weren't good enough last year. They conceded 60 goals in the regular season, which was one of the worst defensive records in the East. So they have brought in South African Bozazi, 20-year-old international. He was expected to go to Europe before the Fire came into him. It's been controversial with Hugo Broos, who is the national team manager of South Africa. He doesn't like this move. He can suck it because I'm looking forward to watching him in MLS this year. And still only 2 DPs for the Fire. They have an open slot, and obviously Chicago have been linked with some big names in the last year or so. They were in the race to sign Neymar. They went big to try and get Kevin De Bruyne before he went to Napoli. The latest big name to be linked is Robert Lewandowski. Does that work if Hugo Kuipers is still around? I don't know, but that's something to keep an eye on. He's out of contract at Barcelona at the end of the season. Seems very unlikely Barcelona are going to keep him around, especially on that giant contract, so he would be available, and that has been talked about for quite some time. In terms of the manager and the tactics, as I've mentioned already, a certain Greg Berhalter, he is the head coach. He's entering his second season there. Chicago, they've really gone all in on Berhalter with him as their director of football as well. And so far, I think he's done a really good job at Chicago. It seems like the culture at the club has changed for the better. They've hit on a lot more of their signings. They still have that one extra DP spot in the bag. Feels like the days of Shaqiri and Schweinsteiger are kind of now in the past. And in terms of how Chicago play, It's broadly a 4-3-3 that can become a 4-4-2 at times. It can also become a 3-4-3 when a midfielder drops in to help play out from the back. But if you plot it on paper, you'll always see it as like a 4-3-3. In Chicago, they want to play with the ball, although not like excessively so. They were ranked pretty much smack bang in mid-table for average possession share last season. That might be a personnel thing. Maybe Berhalter wants to turn the dial a little bit more in that sense. I suspect he probably does. But they get width from the fullbacks, which then creates space in between the lines for midfielders to create overloads, and then it's all about the attacking players in the final third. It's about getting those players the freedom and the space to do their thing. And then out of possession, it's often a mid-block rather than like a full high press. But again, I do kind of wonder if we might see the dial turned a little bit more towards that this season now that Berhalter's got this foundation to work with. In terms of key players, I've mentioned a few of them already, but I have to start with the forwards. Only a handful of players scored more goals last season than Kuipers. He's legitimately one of the best centre forwards in the league. Then there's Zinkernagel, who had an incredible individual season last year after coming in from Belgium. Overperformed his underlying numbers, so there might be a little bit of a regression there. But I do kind of wonder if Jonathan Bamba, who, as I said earlier, he can maybe do more to find that consistency. Maybe he makes up some of those numbers this season. Andrew Gutman is a really good outlet down the left side, registered 9 assists last year, which was really, really impressive. His game is about getting crosses in from that side. He's really good, Gutman, at finding that like corridor of uncertainty. I think he's one of the most consistent deliverers of a ball from that side in the league. Going to the goalkeeper spot, Chris Brady, high caliber goalkeeper who could be in the mix for a World Cup spot this summer if he has a good few months between now and the end of, or not the end of the season, excuse me, until the summer, until the World Cup break. And then in defence, Chicago, they exercised Jack Elliott's option at the end of last year. Bozasi, the South African international that I was talking about, seems to be a fair degree of hype around him. I think the suggestion is that maybe like Waterman might be the starting centre-back alongside Jack Elliott, but maybe Bozasi comes into that lineup over the course of the year. So I think he's someone who's going to get some good minutes in central defence this season. And so to wrap up with my VSP, I predict that the Chicago Fire will exceed their XG difference from last season. They were at 5.9 last year. XG difference is basically the difference between your XG for and against. I think they're going to push into the close to the 10s. I think their attacking numbers are more or less going to sustain because I just think they've got really talented attackers. As I say, Zinkernagel maybe doesn't reach the levels of last year, but I think there's other areas where they could make that up. And then I think some of the defensive changes will make a marginal difference as well. So I only need to get a few more goals on that XG difference tally to get that VSP, and so that's where I think this is going to be a year of yet more progress for the Chicago Fire team. I don't see them sliding back down the mountain.
Yeah, I totally agree, Graham. And I don't disagree with maybe a single thing that you said about Chicago. I think this team is set to be improved. And Jeff, you basically said the same thing last week. It seems like they've done a lot of really smart stuff, basically at every turn since Greg Berhalter and sort of the other personnel that he brought in around him came in ahead of last season. I think this team's going to be good. I think their ceiling is still capped, and Graham, you talked about this, by the fact that they only have those two DPs, and even if they do go get Robert Lewandowski, they're probably going to move off of Kuiper, so then they still only have two DPs. So there's going to be some more work for them to do, and I don't think they internally are looking at this year as their year, but they're building towards something, man, and it's fun, because for the first time since I've been doing this job, the Fire are actually a team that you sort of have to pay attention to if you're covering this league.
I just needed to reflect on how I got Sergio Orahel so right and then Chris Brady marginally wrong last year, so as not to get my full prediction point. Graham, had you done your Chicago Fire research when we recorded our Soccer 101 episode last week?
No, I hadn't.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, Chicago are a team that I've got a decent amount of. There's other teams in these previews where I'm like, wow, haven't watched them in a hot minute. But Chicago weren't one of them. Like they were fun last year, so we talked about them a bit.
I got you. No, I was mostly curious because you were relatively very positive about Greg Berhalter and his career prospects. So I was wondering if maybe what you had seen from him in Chicago so far made you slightly more excited for what's to come.
Is this when we try to plot his route to the Premier League and how many steps it would take him?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go and listen to last week's
alert.
101, people.
It was several steps. All right.
Yeah.
On that note, let's take one more break. We'll come back and talk about Ohio and the teams they're in. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody, to the Total Soccer Show. 2 more previews for this episode. Joe, start us off in our final segment. Tell us about the FC of Cincinnati.
I would love to, Taylor. Not named after a citywide tragedy, so I suppose they have that going for them from the absolute jump.
Well, I don't know.
They won a
It's still
few.
in reference.
They won a few
to
wooden
the 3
spoons.
supporters.
There were some tragedies.
Great point, fellas. All right, fair enough. Last season, Cincinnati had a weird year. 65 points, second in the Eastern Conference, second in MLS in the Shield rankings. They had a good season by all accounts. But things were odd. They won 20 games, and yet they won 16 of those games by a single goal. They rarely looked cohesive en route to winning a lot of those games. And they posted the 6th largest XG differential over performance. So their underlying numbers were all out of whack in the American Soccer Analysis data set, which goes back to 2013. They were way better than the underlying numbers said they should be. They were way better when it comes to single goal wins, that you shouldn't really be able to stack that many. No, they weren't fully healthy, Cincinnati, so I suppose I'm painting sort of a negative picture. I still think they did a lot of things right last year. They had injuries at center back. They had injuries at the base of midfield. The talent around Evander never quite clicked. Denke had a good season, but maybe not quite what was expected. So it was an odd year across the board for Cincy, even though it came with success. They fell short in the postseason, of course, because they did not make it to MLS Cup, and they did not win it, which are the goals of this team when they spend like they do. But I still am pretty high on the Cincinnati team, and I'll sort of explain why that is throughout this preview. Let's look at what changed over the offseason, where they had a number of notable outgoing players. Luca Oriano, who was really, really good for them in 2024, had some contracts disputes with the front office and then never really got utilized maybe in the way that would suit him best. He's now a CF Monterrey player. So he's gone, and that has left a little bit of a hole for this Cincinnati team in the attack that I think they've already filled. Lucas Engel is gone. He was not renewed. He is now an RSL player. He played a bunch of minutes for them at left wing back last year. Yuya Kubo, who played everywhere for this team, is sort of the Weston McKennie of Major League Soccer. He was not brought back this year by FC Cincinnati, former DP, then not a DP, but still a good utility guy for them. And then Brenner, who came in and helped them usurp the Columbus Crew late last season. He was brought in on sort of a deadline day deal for FC Cincinnati. He was going to need to be a DP if they were going to bring him back, and they just didn't have the room. So Brenner is not back on this team, but he was awesome for them last year. He really was. Sort of made good with the fan base after storming out of town the first time around. In terms of the incomings, it's a shorter list, only 2 real notable incomings for this team. The first is Christian Fletcher, who's a former DC United homegrown, had a little cup of coffee over in the UK. He's now back in this MLS ecosystem. He's an FC Cincinnati player. He's a guy who can play as a forward, or I think probably more likely can play as a wingback for this team. And speaking of wingbacks, that's their other real meaningful addition. Brian Ramirez is coming in from LDU Quito in Ecuador. It's one of the bigger clubs in Ecuador. It's one of the more notable clubs in the non-glamour leagues of South America, I suppose. So outside of Brazil and Argentina. He's a guy who played a lot of winger in Ecuador and is going to play a lot of wingback in Cincinnati, because we know that Pat Noonan loves his 3-4-1-2 setup, and we know that he loves attacking wingbacks. And that was not what Cincinnati did last year. They did that shape, but they did not use attacking wingbacks. They had DeAndre Yedlin and Lucas Engel as their 2 wingbacks, and Yedlin over 30, Engel more of a defensive-minded player when he was over in England. Both of those guys are going to be more comfortable further back in the attack rather than actually flying forward down the wings. And so I think Cincinnati recognized that was a flaw last year. And that was part of what held them back as a team, is that their attacking balance was off. And so you bring in a guy like Brian Ramirez to storm down the left. You have Ender Echenique, who we talked about, Taylor, last year towards the end of the season quite a bit, as a guy who's fun to watch down the right, but comes with his own sorts of problems, because that's how recruiting works in MLS, is you're not going to find the perfect player because they're not coming to your league, right? But they're going to be more aggressive down the outside this year, Cincinnati. I'm very, very excited about that. Pat Noonan is a pragmatist, I think, at his core. And I think he recognizes that the pragmatic choice here is to be a bit more aggressive, given how much money they've spent at the back and how much money they've spent up their spine. Noonan's going to put this team in that 3-4-1-2 setup. Like I said, it's going to be Evander as a number 10. Denke is going to be one of the forwards, and I'm banking on us seeing Brian Ramirez, the newcomer from Ecuador, at left wing back, and Ender Echenique, who came in last summer, at right wing back. And I'm really, really excited to see what this all looks like. And part of the reason why I think Cincinnati can get away with being so aggressive, basically taking 2 wingers and making them wing backs, which they've done over and over again since Chris Albright and Pat Noonan have come into this team. They did it with Alvaro Barreal. They did it with Luca Oriano. Now they're doing it with these guys. I think part of the reason they can get away with that is because they have so many key players in their center back room. They have Nat Miazga, who they really, really need a full healthy season out of, I think, to be the team they want to be. They made Miles Robinson a DP. They have Tine Chidebe. They have Nick Haglund. They have Obina Nwobodo at the number 6 spot. They need him to be healthy this year to be at their best as well. They have Pablo Luca. They have Samuel Guidi, who I really, really like. He started for Obina Nwobodo late last season and looks like a guy who has a European future, I would say, like a Europa League sort of level future. He's a really fun player. If that foundation is set in the back, then the wingbacks can go forward and be dangerous, and they can provide additional service into Denke that Evander's just not going to do, right? Evander's an elite number 10 in this league, but he's not the classic through-ball threading number 10 that maybe we think of, and certainly that we thought of Lucho Acosta being. He's more of that goal and assist threat and a set-piece monster, both for himself and serving the ball onto others. than he is a playmaker first and foremost for the players around him. So I think the attack is going to have better balance this year. And Denke, in terms of key players, surely benefit from that. He was a really, really high-price signing, came in for, I believe, $16 million for Cincinnati ahead of last season, a club record incoming deal. And he was good, but not transcendent last year. And if he gets more service, he could be something closer to transcendent this year. So he, Evander, and Miles Robinson are all the DPs. We know how good Evander is. We know that Miles Robinson's a good center back in MLS. And then they need healthy seasons from the guys that I mentioned already, Nobodo and Miazga. There's other good pieces in this team in terms of depth, but those are the guys that are really going to win games for Cincinnati this year. My VSP, for a team that I think is going to be very good, even though the underlying numbers didn't like them, I've listed a lot of names of guys who I think are close to elite, if not elite MLS players. And ultimately, that's where I come down on this team, is I'm going to believe in the talent. And my VSP relates to that talent. FC Cincinnati's outside backs, so their two wing backs, or just all of the outside backs on the roster combined, are going to total more goal contributions than any other team's outside backs in 2026. There's just not a better team at finding high-flying wingbacks in Cincinnati and MLS. Charlotte do it with strikers. Cincinnati do it with outside backs. Like, they just know how to find these players. They know how to make them work in the system, and it just works. So Echenique and Ramirez are going to do the heavy lifting there. They're going to be more aggressive, and I am stoked to watch them and really to watch this team, who I think are going to be excellent.
Joe, you've covered a lot of ground there. I'm not sure I have any follow-ups other than, can you repeat your prediction one more time?
FC Cincinnati's outside backs will total more goal contributions than any other team's outside backs in 2026. So it should be a pretty easy one to tally up at the end of the year. Most goals and assists combined from those players. I think they're going to be fun. I think they're going to be good, and I'm excited to watch.
Does that mean you have to tally those for every other team and every other player in those teams?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to do that if we're being honest, but I think the spirit of the prediction is there. And if I'm within one for the prediction tallying, I will do the work. Don't you worry.
Well, look, you can also do the work with your other prediction, and you can program a bot to say that Steven Alzate is Darlington Nagby-esque, and we can knock this thing off before opening kick.
Great point, Jeff. Let's just get
or
that
you
one
just
out of the
pay
way.
off Fabrizio Romano. It's really one or the other.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the budget for that second idea, but the first one seems really doable. Let's make that happen.
On the subject of tracking stats, let me just say one more time how much I miss FB Ref, as I tried to verify or disprove all of my specific predictions last year and learned that it was a lot harder to do when you don't have access to the data that you use to make those predictions. Fun times indeed. Fun times for FC Cincinnati, where we are expecting big, successful, happy things. Are we expecting the same things, Jeff, from the Columbus Crew?
Yeah, so the Crew will feel different this year for the first time in a few years, I suppose. When we last saw them, they were bounced in the first round. They fought valiantly to force a third game against FC Cincinnati, but ultimately were overmatched. They were doomed by their inability to finish the usual plum chances that the team creates with regularity, and also possibly just never adequately replaced Cucho Hernandez. And then the rest of the deconstruction of the 2023 title-winning team really commenced. And Wilfred Nancy left, went to Celtic. Don't ask me how it went there. Couldn't possibly tell you. Darlington Nagby retired, a very crucial midfield facilitator and a legend of Major League Soccer. Also tried to go to Celtic at one point. Didn't work out for him. Maybe worked out just fine in hindsight. And Jason Russell Roll, Darlington Nagby. Like,
you mean the old Steven Alzate? Cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice.
That's right. The
Guys,
prototypical Steven Alzate.
I felt the pulse right there. I'm feeling electric right now when Taylor said that. I just need someone outside of this panel to say it, and then I'm sold.
If it shows up in the out of context, it doesn't count. Jason Russell Roll was sold to Toulouse on deadline day as well, so there goes another young Canadian forward. Not the biggest turnover in terms of additions, and when you hear the number of outgoings, I suppose it makes sense. They are bringing back a lot of their starting core that they've had from 24 and 25 in particular. Sekou Bangura is probably the highlight. He is from Guinea. He's a good box-to-box kind of ball-winning midfielder. He can do a little bit of everything. He's very young. He's raw. Last played in Israel, so there's also going to be possibly a little bit of an acclimation period, but he does look like he does have the profile that could be very good and effective for a midfield enforcer in Major League Soccer. Jamal Tiare comes in from Atlanta as some forward depth. He had 11 goals in 56 games for Atlanta over the last couple of years. And then they surprised quite a few people by filling their third and final U22 initiative spot last week with Nariman Akhundzadeh, an Azerbaijan international who signed from Karabag. Late in the window, 2 goals and an assist in the Champions League at age 21. That'll usually turn some heads. He's been playing as a striker. He can play on a wing. How much is the system going to change? I don't know. Ask Henrik Rydström, the new head coach of the Columbus Crew, who comes in from Malmo, having won the league twice and won the domestic cup once. He's known to be an outspoken political advocate, but considering his offseason interview on the club website was titled, quote, "Not a revolution, but an evolution," I'd say he's ready for the DNC stage. He wants to play more directly than Wilfried Nancy did. His idea is that the team kind of dawdled a little bit too much in the middle third and that they needed to just get on with it, to quote a Monty Python movie. But then he's very quick to say, no, but we want to dominate possession as well. So it seems like you're going to have a little bit of that ideology, and maybe you're just seeing a few percentage points tick off of the possession ledger or the field tilt, perhaps, and instead be trying to be a little bit more proactive. He's fluid. He claims to be an early adopter of relationism, which I think is a little bit overblown as being like a broad ideology. It's not. It's kind of a tactic or a facet, a tenet within an ideology. It's the idea that you trust your players to make decisions, and you don't need to have very strictly spelled out positional play assignments like Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta. So what does that really look like? Well, with structure like AFC Bournemouth, relationism can be sensational. It can lead to a lot of really exciting, proactive play with a lot of that sort of peak Barclays era sort of vibes about it and players trying the audacious. If it doesn't work, if you don't have a structure, you look like your coach who just rolled the ball out and you're usually trying to find a job within about, 12 games. So we'll see how that goes. He likes numerical overloads and zones. He's going to try to get his players to kind of come together in different pockets of the area to overwhelm an opponent, draw them out of position, and then spray a ball over the top into open terrain. Again, AFC Bournemouth sort of things if you watch the Premier League. Isatal said at one point it's like watching Wilfried Nancy. That makes sense because Henrik Rydström says that one of his main tactical influences was the 2023 Columbus Crew. So, good work on that one. In Malmo, I'm going to spend more time on Rydström than anything else because I think that, again, when you're bringing back a lot of players, it's just a matter of how are they all going to fit into this. He played a lot of different formations and structures. Again, this is a guy who likes to have kind of these principles of play, and then he's going to pick the lineup based on either the matchup or availability, suspensions, international breaks, what have you. They shoot often. Most often it was a 4-2-2-2 in possession with a little bit of width from that line beneath the strikers. They played very cleanly. They didn't have a lot of fouls. They didn't have a lot of cards for the Allsvenskan, but the fewest interceptions of any team. Again, is that a talent issue or is that sort of, hey, don't go studs up on these guys too often. I think we can contain them in good areas. And possession-wise, they had 57.7% last year, second in the league, and very similar to Wilfried Nancy's rates with the Columbus Crew towards the end. Key players, the gang's all here. Your three DPs are back. Diego Rossi, who tied his career high for goals in a season with 16 in Major League Soccer last year, would benefit, I think, if Rydström plays with wingers rather than kind of tucking him into the half space where he can find more space and then kind of be more of a threat on the break. Wessam Abu Ali in his first full season came in last year from Al Ali, was the nominal Kucha replacement, but just couldn't really stay on the field. Had a couple of issues when he would come on and off, but also was effective. So I think that there is upside here. He is someone who could have sort of a stealth golden boot challenge to him if everything lines up correctly. Patrick Schulte's in goal, another one of these young Americans who's going to be hoping to make the World Cup squad. More inconsistency in 2025 than we'd seen from him the previous two seasons, but on his day can flip results and is very good in build-up phases, which is crucial for a Rydström system. Steven Moreira moonlit as a number 10 last year just to kind of try to create a spark in the final third, but is very best at a free roaming sort of right center back in a back three scenario. Hasn't played for Cape Verde since 2024, so doesn't look like he's going to be on a World Cup roster, unfortunately, but hopefully he can play his way back onto that because Steven Moreira on his day is a very fun novelty of a defender. Max Arfsten is another one who will kind of hinge a lot on how Rydström wants to set up this team. He isn't really defensively sound enough to play as a left back and a back four, but as a wing back with three center backs behind him, has looked very credible for club and country alike. Also on the bubble again for a World Cup. Sean Sawadski is the midfielder who will be the holdover piece, who's trying to keep some of that Darlington Nagby calmness vibes about this team. And my VSP is that they will have multiple players who score at least 10 goals in all competitions, but none will score more than 13.
Ooh.
I think this feels very much by a scoring by committee. You've got Daniel Gazdag in there, who I didn't mention because he didn't really do anything worth mentioning in 2025 Correct. After his trade, as he tried to acclimate from life away from Philly. Greatly underperformed his XG, so theoretically he got into spots, but I think when you look at the underlying numbers of the Nancy era, what you saw in 24 and 25 was a team that could generate a lot of XG with regularity, and they had the biggest XG goal difference over performance in 2024, and then they were actually in the negative last year. So, Celtic fans, I've heard, will tell you that XG doesn't win games after all or save jobs, and I think at this point they're going to have to convert more of those to actual Gs, AGs, if you will.
I think, Jeff, that's fantastically well said across the board. I love your VSP there about the scoring by committee because I do think that's a very likely outcome for Columbus this year. Rossi's not really a 1A kind of guy. Gazdag's definitely not that. I think a lot of this season is going to rest on how good Wissam Abu Ali is. And I think he could be pretty good. I mean, it was a small sample size what we saw from him last year, but he looked very, very smooth very early on in Columbus before he was down for the year with injuries. If he is amazing and is a top-tier MLS striker, I think the Crew could be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. And if he's not that, and if it is the scoring by committee approach that you mentioned, that's not a bad outcome. And I still think the floor for this team is fairly high because of how much continuity they have from what's been a good team, right? Rydstrom's going to change some things, and that could be a little bit of a wild card here. But I think in general, when you have a good team and you bring back a bunch of players, the floor should be high. And I think it is that with Columbus. If Abu Ali is a very good player, I think this team will be very good. And if he is just sort of fine as a DP, then I think they will be a sort of fringe playoff team. But I'm stoked to watch this team, man. Like this, I think could be one of the most interesting teams in the league because Rydstrom is wild as a personality and as a coach. I think that's going to make some really, really interesting soccer.
I'm personally really interested in what Gazdag's year, to go deeper on that for a moment, what his year looks like. Because I'm surprised at how quickly he's kind of been written off as, like, Jeff, and this isn't like to have a go at you.
No, it is.
Reflecting reflecting the general mood about Columbus, around Columbus and Gazdag. But, like, I was thinking to myself, I was like, he's only mentioned 2 DPs. Who's the third DP? And I've then had to rack my mind of, like, oh, it's Daniel Gazdag. And it's amazing how quickly he's gone from, like, top level difference maker for a good level team in MLS to, like, sort of a forgotten figure in this team. And when I'm looking at when we're kind of previewing these teams ahead of the season, I did this with Chicago and Jonathan Bamba, like, who are the players they can get a little bit more out of to move the needle? Gazdag has to be one of those guys. But I'm interested to find out if that was a role issue last year, the position he was playing under Wilfred Nancy. Was it an environment issue, and whether those issues will disappear coming into this team, which is under a new manager this year.
One thing that's really curious about Gazdag is that in Philly, he had a tendency to just end up at the penalty spot all the time. And I don't mean in the run of play. I don't mean from, like, chances they're created. I mean that the dude just took a lot of penalties. Like, in 2023, I think he tied an MLS record with 11 penalty kicks in the regular season, and he converted all 11, so, like, credit to him. That's remarkable in its own sort of novelty. But so often Philadelphia's system had movement, touches in the box that then led to those sorts of challenges that defenders were mindlessly making across the field, but once you get them, like, just inside the line, you convert it into a penalty, and it's the best chance that you can possibly create in a scenario like that. And Columbus just was not taking those box touches or necessarily staying on the ball. They kept the ball moving, and so I think, in a weird way, they just need to get more penalties. He was 2 for 2 last year with Columbus, and I think that generally he is one of those players where he sees the ball go into the net and he plays better, right? And that's great, but you just need to get him those situations where he can put the ball in the net, and he is 29 for 30 in his career in penalties, so I would probably just keep trying to get those.
All right, well, that is preview 1 of 5 in the books. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for your efforts. Over on the Patreon, we're going to spend some time breaking down the 2026 kits, the best and the worst, and then the ones that Graham likes for whatever reason. Graham Ruthven, thank you so much for taking the time to preview some MLS with us today.
You mean the ones I've already bought, Taylor? New England Revolution.
So all of them?
Yeah, all of them.
You like the Revs one? You like the Gillette Razor advert that
I do,
it
yeah.
is? Okay.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
We're already going to fight. Jeff Rueter, I never want to fight with you unless you also like the Revs New Jersey.
I don't.
That a boy, Jeff. And Joe Lowery, your opinions are your own, and they're all valid.
Don't remember what the jersey looks like. I'm going to do this thing where I say which of the teams we talked about on the episode I think is going to finish highest in the Shield rankings at the end of each of these this week. FC Cincinnati. Thank you and goodbye.
Yeah. Cincinnati, Chicago. And then Charlotte, and then Chicago, and then the Crew? No. Crew's higher, right?
Didn't say I was going to rank him. I just said I was going to take them.
I'm trying to do it all now.
Okay.
Montreal
bottom. Montreal.
Montreal last. I think Chicago's a good shout, Jeff. And it wouldn't totally floor me if it was Columbus either, nor would it floor me if it was Charlotte. Like, I think there's a lot of good teams we talked about today.
Yeah.
It won't be Atlanta and it won't be Montreal. Let's put it that way.
This much we know. I'm glad we've established that. Gentlemen, thank you all for all your efforts. We look forward to more previewing tomorrow, but for now, thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you very soon.